to spend as much time as we need walking through the regulations and the details of those programs. And that's what we're going to be sharing today is mostly regulation text. So hopefully you've had a chance to either had prior exposure to these items or taken a look at them over the last week or so that they've been released. First on today's agenda is the continuation of the small size school district program. We have a complete set of regulations today, a proposal for you, the keyword being proposal. We have a lot of rationale as to why we landed on the approach you're going to see in the item today, but we're completely open to feedback. We want to hear from as many of you as possible, either today or in the next couple of weeks over, when you have a chance to digest all the information. We'll be accepting any sort of feedback you have for a couple of weeks after the conclusion of today's meeting. This program presents a really wonderful opportunity for small school districts, and we really want to make sure that we set it up in a way that benefits the most districts possible. And that's really, when you boil it down, that's what our approach has been. So that's where we're coming from. And I hope that you, like I said, I hope you have given some thought to some of these ideas. Sorry about that, you guys. As I was saying, we're going to be taking our time today with the small size school district program. Nicholas Sutton will be presenting that item to us and the regulations to you today. After we conclude with the small size school district program, we'll be talking about energy efficiency grants from Prop 2. We have our partners here from DSA to help us through that discussion. Fair warning, there is some technical aspects to that item, but we'll do our best to keep it as simple and straightforward as possible. And we really look forward to your input on this topic as well. Maria Faust from OPSC will begin the conversation on energy efficiency grants. And we also have Eric Drever and Alicia Chavez from DSA here to help us with that one. Looking forward to our discussion. Again, please feel free to enter questions into the chat or use the raise hand feature when we have pauses at the end of today's presentations. With that, I will turn it over to Nick.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. As Brian mentioned, my name is Nicholas Sutton, and I am back again to continue our discussion about the proposed implementation plans for the new small school district program, which I'll refer to as new program throughout the rest of my presentation. Links to the full text and recordings from the prior two stakeholder meetings held on February 13th, 2025 and April 17th, 2025 for this topic are provided in our item. Please note that no additional written questions or feedback were received by OPSC since the April 17, 2025 stakeholder meeting. Today's item presents proposed regulations for this new program and a few additional topics, considerations, and proposals for which we are requesting stakeholder feedback on. A summary of the proposed regulations is provided on stamp pages 3 and 4 of our item. But we are actually going to go section by section with everyone using our attachment A8B document from our item, which begins on stamp page 8. So I will allow Brian some time to get down to stamp page 8. And this is to allow everyone to see and digest those proposed additions and proposed new article 13.5. All right. For section 2, we are proposing to add new definitions for the final small school district program apportionment, the Form SAB 5012, the preliminary small school district program apportionment, and the project and construction management grant. For sections 90.2 and 90.3, which are below this, there are only minor language changes, as you can kind of see there. And those were proposed to add the new program for the priority funding process. So do we have any questions regarding any of these right now? I do know that, especially with those definitions at the top there might be some questions that some folks might have.
Not saying anything right now.
Okay. All right, well, moving on then, let's take a look at the proposed language within Article 13.5 itself, and we'll start with Section 156. This section proposes a general overview of the new program, which will provide a new preliminary apportionment for small school districts seeking new construction or modernization funding. Applicants will use a new form, the Form SAB 5012, to apply into the new program. This section also provides the proposed regulatory requirements related to the eligibility component of the application process. Staff proposes that the update of an applicant's new construction eligibility, including those who previously locked in eligibility for 3 or 5 years, be submitted at the time of applying for the new program. Do we have any questions regarding this section here? Okay, seeing none. Now let's take a look at section 157, which proposes the application submittal and acceptance process for various circumstances. Subsection A of this section proposes the establishment of a 180 calendar day period beginning the date that the Office of Administrative Law approves the language for applicants who do not have a current approved application or a current approved application for funding on the school facility program workload list or the applications received beyond bond authority list, and also who have not received a new construction grant or modernization grant, and that is since a to be determined date. So you'll see a placeholder in there for a date. This to be determined date is one of the additional considerations that we are requesting stakeholder feedback on, and I will be providing additional information to everyone about that at the end of my presentation. But for now, do we have any questions about anything in this section? Okay, seeing none, then we'll go and get to that question in the chat on the side, but now let's go and look at subsection B of this section, which proposes a separate 45 calendar day window that would immediately follow the 180 calendar day window previously mentioned. This separate 45 calendar day window would be for applicants who have a current design-only funding or full funding application on the school facility program workload list, or the applications received beyond bond authority lists for new construction or modernization prior to the effective date for this subsection. Applicants seeking to elect for a transition under this subsection will need to withdraw their current application for funding, submit a Form SAB 5012, and submit a cover letter that identifies everything mentioned in subsection B2, as you see on your screen. The cover letter should provide a certification from the applicant where they acknowledge the withdrawal of their previous application and that the applicant understands that their Form SAB 5012 application is, if it's not funded, their previous Form SAB 5004 application will be reinstated and it will be placed back onto the school facility program workload list or the applications received beyond bond authority list for new construction or modernization with the receive date of the previous Form SAB 5004 application being retained. I know that was a bit of information there. So do we have any questions regarding this subsection?
Thanks, Nick. One other thing I wanted to mention too is, so we received a lot of feedback in the last meeting on this topic in particular, but also prior to that. And that's kind of these regulations are the manifestation of those comments that we got. We had sort of an idea of how we wanted to perhaps propose priorities for moving into this program, and those were kind of affirmed by some of the information that we received from our stakeholders, particularly that first section. I'm going to go back up and show it here, section little a. We had heard a lot that a lot of small districts, among other issues, were having some difficulty planning and applying for the program because of the uncertainty of future funding. And so a lot of them either never applied at all or didn't have a chance to kind of get in line and get their project going. We've also heard comments that districts that are already on a list, either the workload list or the applications received beyond bond authority list, they have had the opportunity to get their project started. They're a little closer to being, I guess you could say, shovel ready or ready to begin the projects. And so there was some opinion that maybe those should be prioritized. We also thought about just leaving it completely open and how that would work. So I wanted to just communicate that we've really tried to look at this from every angle. We've tried to consider all of those really valid points of view, and this is the proposal that we're presenting to you. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it's a proposal. We would really like to hear from you what you think would be the most fair way to approach this. It is a limited pot of funds. We know that, and we anticipate to be a pretty popular program. Especially the modernization area, where a lot of small school districts will probably be focusing. So I encourage you to absorb this information, really give it some close consideration, and send us your comments, either whether you're going to mention it to us today verbally or in the chat, or send it to us in writing. We would really appreciate to hear your thoughts on all this.
Right.
So I think
Oh,
there's no hands raised, but there is some questions in the chat. So maybe what? Why don't you go ahead and finish, Nicholas, and then we can wrap back around and get to those questions.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So subsection C proposes that all applicants not meeting the criteria in subsection B will be eligible to apply to the new program immediately after the window in subsection B expires. Under the language in subsection C, we have a placeholder, as you can see there on your screen, for the potential of adding language to specify how applications that are remaining on the new program workload list should be addressed if this new program becomes oversubscribed, and the process to be used if potential future funding becomes available for this program. This is another one of those additional considerations that we are requesting stakeholder feedback on. So I will be providing additional information to everyone about this at the end of my presentation. For now, again, do we have any questions maybe about C or anything related to .157?
And maybe we can go ahead and ask a couple. There's a couple in here that are related to exactly what we're talking about. Let's see, there's an eligibility question in here that we're going to be getting to in a minute. Let's see. There's a facility hardship specific question. It says, my question is explicit that small school districts that have not applied for new construction or mod in over 2 decades, but were recently approved for a separate project under the facility hardship program, be excluded under the definition. Okay. Yeah, Lisa, that is something that we will definitely consider. I don't think that was our intent. I think we were more looking at new construction or modernization applications, because that's what the type of projects that can be applied for under this program. But we will make sure to clarify that. Thank you for that question. Ilana asks,
Brian, I appreciate that.
Oh, sure. It's Lisa Silverman. Hey, Lisa.
Lisa, hey, thanks.
Sure. Ilana asks, is there a way for districts who receive design funds but have not secured DSA and CDE plan approvals to get in line for funding prior to securing DSA and CDE plan approvals? Do you have an estimated on the dollar amount of small school districts currently on OPSC workload list? For that latter half of that question, yes, we do. It's I don't remember the exact amounts, but I know that if all of the small school district projects that are on either the workload or applications received beyond bond authority list were to commute over to the small size school district program workload when we open that up, I think it's roughly half of the authority that was carved out of Prop 2. The 330 million for new construction and 400 million for modernization. I don't know the exact number, but I think it's roughly half. And then your other question, Ilana, is there a way for school districts who receive design funds but have not secured approvals to get in line for funding prior to securing plan approvals? I think there will be an avenue for that. which section it makes it into, which application window, I can't really say right now, just because we haven't, these regulations aren't solidified. But currently, if they have received design funds, they wouldn't be on a list, and so I think they would be in that last section. But we can definitely take that under consideration, and maybe that's a scenario that we can kind of tease out a little bit more for our next item. So really great questions. Thank you.
All right. Well, moving on then to sections 157.1 and 157.2, because they are married in a way. One's for new construction applications and one's for modernization applications. So we'll cover them both at the same time. These sections propose the preliminary apportionment grant determinations for both new construction and modernization applications. Section 157.1 specifies the determination for new construction applications, and that it will be the sum of all eligible new construction grants as provided in sections 70 through 77.4. The project and construction management grant as calculated below in this item here for subsection B, and an inflator factor as it is calculated in subsection C of 157.1. Okay, and then for section 157.2, this specifies the determination for modernization applications, and that it will be the sum of all eligible modernization grants as provided in sections 77.5 and in 78 through 78.10. The project and construction management grant is again calculated in that subsection under B, and an inflator factor calculated in that subsection under C. Do we have any questions regarding any of the proposed language here for either 157.1 or 157.2?
Yeah, just a reminder for those of you that might be hearing the project and construction management grant terminology for the first time, or don't recall it from prior meetings, that's going to be a grant of up to 5%. That's intended to cover administrative costs, which also the thought behind that in the legislation, in legislative language, was that it would assist small school districts with hiring some help to get their applications up and running, or any administrative costs that they might need. Because so often, as most of you know, these school districts, especially if they even have a facilities department at all, many of them do not. You have staff that are doing a third or even a fourth job trying to get applications in. So that grant is put in place to assist with that function, with the administrative part of applying for funds. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at the moment, Nick.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything neither. All right, so section 157.3, that proposes the fund release process for preliminary apportionment under this new program. Applicants must qualify for financial hardship and must meet the requirements in subsection A to request a separate advanced release of funds for design for a new construction application, or it must meet the requirements in subsection B to request a separate advanced release of funds for design for a modernization application. You will note that these are fairly similar to a lot of our other programs under the school facility program, but we know that there might be some questions. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to section 157.4. This section proposes the requirements for converting a preliminary apportionment to a final apportionment under this new program. Applicants would need to meet all eligibility requirements specified in subsection A of this section and submit a complete Form SAB 5004 and ensure that the number of pupil grants being requested on the form meets the requirements specified in subsection C of this section. If an applicant is unable to meet the requirements in this section, the preliminary apportionment for this new program will be rescinded. Do we have any questions regarding any of the proposed language here? All right, also seeing none here for questions. So we'll move on to section 157.5. This section proposes the time limits to convert a preliminary apportionment to a final apportionment under the new program. Subsection A of this section requires that the conversion takes place within 4 years of the date of the preliminary apportionment, unless approved for an extension pursuant to section 157.6, which we'll go over next. If the conversion is not met within this time limit, the applicant's preliminary apportionment under the new program will be rescinded, and it will follow the requirements specified in either subsection B or C of this section, and then that's dependent on whether the applicant received an advance release of funds for design or not. So B is the regulation if there is no fund release at all, given previously, and then C is for if there was funds released. Do we have any questions regarding any of the proposed language here? All right, seeing none for this section. So we'll move on to section 157.6, which proposes those requirements for receiving an extension on the time limit to convert a preliminary apportionment to a final apportionment under the new program. The request may be for a single 1-year extension of the time prescribed in section 157.5. And the request must meet the criteria in subsections A and B of this section, so of 157.6. An extension request may be approved by the State Allocation Board after the time limit elapses, but OPSC must receive that extension request prior to the deadline for which the time limit would have elapsed. Do you have any questions regarding any of the proposed language here around the time limit extension? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to section 157.7, which proposes the requirements for the final apportionment grant determination under this new program. The final apportionment for the new program will be based on the provisions of any amended or new regulations that are effective at the time of the final apportionment Form SAB 5004 that is submitted and accepted for processing. If the final apportionment is equal to or less than the preliminary apportionment for the new program, the final apportionment will be funded entirely and is subject to the requirements in subsection A1 of this section. If the final apportionment is greater than the preliminary apportionment for the new program, the conversion process to a final apportionment will still occur, but the final apportionment is subject to the requirements in subsection A2A or A2B of this section, and then that's depending on whether the balance in the fund source is greater or less than the difference between the final apportionment and the preliminary apportionment. So A is the language for if it's greater, B is the language for if it's if the funds are less than the difference. So I know that there's a lot of information on the page there. Is there any questions regarding some of the proposed language here? Okay, seeing none, then we're going to move on to section 157.8, which proposes the requirements for the final apportionment fund release for the new program. But it's simply, once the conversion process is complete, an applicant may request a release of the remaining funds as prescribed in sections 90 or 90.2 for the priority funding process. Do we have any questions regarding this section here? Okay, also seeing none, I'll move on to section 158, which is the last section of our proposed regulations here. This section proposes the requirement for the substantial progress and expenditure reporting timelines for this new program. These timelines are very similar to the current timelines for most of our grant programs under the school facility program. So I will allow everyone to have some time to look through these proposed regulations and to provide us with any questions that they might have. But again, they follow a very similar structure to what we've been using for our other programs.
Yeah, there's really, I don't think any changes, right, Nick? I think it follows it pretty much exactly like our other programs as far as substantial progress and reporting timelines.
Yeah, exactly. And then same thing for the priority funding, which I see is mentioned there in B with the 90
Yes.
language. So.
And here's the rest of that section if anybody would want to take a look at that. Okay, I think that concludes this item as far as our presentation goes. Is there anything that would like us? Oh, Nick. Oh, that's right. We want to back up, Nick. Huh?
Yeah. We want to go back up to the last page of our cover letter for this item or cover item. And it's going to be stamp page 5 here. So yes, this does conclude our regulatory overview, though. But we did have those 3 additional considerations that we are requesting stakeholder feedback on, and I wanted to just touch on those real briefly here. So these additional considerations can be found, like I said earlier, on page 5, stamp page 5 of this item, which Brian's showing up on the screen. The first consideration is for the idea of adding additional language to the end of section 157, and then this would be to specify how applications that are remaining on the new program workload list should be addressed if this new program becomes oversubscribed, and the process to be used if potential future funding becomes available for this program. That second consideration is for the period of time for which small school districts would have not received new construction or modernization funding, and when they would be eligible to apply during the priority 180 calendar day period. And then lastly, number 3 on the screen there, that's going to be, we're asking for stakeholder consideration on the idea of allowing design-only funding applications that are currently on the school facility program workload list and were submitted by a school district, a small school district, to be included in the proposed 180 calendar day window period. And if that were to happen, if we were to scroll down to the regulation text maybe for this one, it would be in 157. If we were to move those design onlys up into that 180 day calendar window, there is the idea of potentially removing subsection B entirely, so that 45-day calendar window, and then just allowing all of the applicants after that to follow under what is currently C, which is if you don't meet the requirements in A, we'll then allow every other application that would meet the eligibility criteria to come into the program. Again, so once the 180-day window ends. So I know that was a lot of information that we just gave. So looking for stakeholder feedback specifically regarding these considerations. Obviously, feel free to give us any feedback that on anything related to any of the regulations that we've went over. And I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to our additional proposals for this new program. And I would like to pass it back over to Brian, so that way you can open this conversation back up to any remaining feedback or questions from our stakeholders in attendance. Brian?
Thank you, Nick. Sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, so basically, if like you were saying, we would just eliminate this section, and we'd only have A and B then. So we'd have that initial 180-day period, and then it would just be open for anyone else. Okay, I think we do have a couple questions in the chat. One thing I wanted to mention, kind of, and maybe just reiterate about this particular piece here, about the kind of the look back, I guess you could say. The idea there was, if somebody hasn't participated in the program in, say, 15 or 20 years, that's essentially like not really participating ever. It's kind of equivalent to that. And so that's kind of what we were trying to see if anybody thought that might also be a good idea, is to put a certain date back. It's hard to tie it to any sort of milestone or exact reason, and so that's why we didn't propose an actual look back date. It's just an idea that we had that we thought we might want to run by everyone. and see if any of you thought it was also maybe a good idea for something to consider. Let's see. So related to this section specifically, Lisa has a question that says, when will a determination be made to date in section .57, this date that we're talking about? Well, if everyone agrees that it's a good idea, and that we want to have a look back date, so you'd either qualify for this particular 180-day window, you'd either qualify to be able to enter in that window by not ever having any SFP new construction or modernization applications since the SFP began, so back to 1988, or there hasn't been any since whatever date we input there. And again, just kind of like what I was just saying, we're not quite sure if we want to do that or not. If we want to open up a date, maybe we pick when priority funding began. Maybe there's some sort of a milestone we could tie it to. We're not quite sure about that, so we're looking for input on that. If we go with that piece, it would be part of our final regulation package. But we do anticipate having at least one more public meeting prior to taking these regulations to the SAB. I think we're going to have at least one more meeting. If we do move to the SAB, we will provide a very substantial reason why we picked a date if we do. Okay, and then looking back in the chat, there's a question from Ilana. It says, will OPSC be doing an estimate of the value of the applications that are on our list based on full funding for those projects, as the set aside will be based on total project eligibility or not, or just design? So I think the question is, and I kind of butchered that the way I read it, sorry about that, but I think what Ilana is asking is, are we going to base it off of the amount that they're requesting for design, or are we going to base it off the amount that would be for full funding of the application so far as the set aside goes? And I think Josh was going to speak to that one.
Yeah, definitely a question. Thank you for asking. Again, the continued engagement and questions through the chat. For the ability to update an estimate to capture those that are on the current workload list and/or applications received beyond bond authority as designed, OPSC would be unable to get an accurate kind of forward-looking estimate for that, and that is because the current SFP modernization new construction applications that are submitted and received for design requests do not include any supplemental grants. We would not be able to accurately depict what those would look like. We could look at the ability to maybe identify it based on the pupil grant-based full funding attribute alone. But again, there would be no way to accurately depict that because the design applications do not include eligibility for any supplemental grants.
Thank you. Okay, the next question I see is from Steve Martinez. If a school district exceeds the defined small school district enrollment threshold, which is 2,500 students or less, at the time of application submission, but currently has enrollment below the threshold, which enrollment figure will OPSC use to determine eligibility for the small school district program? Will OPSC use the enrollment at the time of application submission or at the current enrollment? So I think what Steve's getting at is when you, like, let's say you're a small school district, you're at 2,400 enrollment when you apply for your preliminary approval. And then at some point between your preliminary approval and your final conversion application, you go over that 2,500 amount. So what will we be looking at?
Yeah, in the item, we do have some proposed language that kind of addresses some of this portion of this question. And it's actually at the very top of the proposed regulations in the general section. So proposed regulation section 1859.156, stamp page 10. It would be based upon, and this is again that proposal, the time of the application submittal. You'll notice the language in there identifies that the new construction eligibility would need to be established or updated as appropriate at the time of the program apportionment. Again, this is going to be proposed as a separate program. It would be a different processing, but it would be at the time that is received. It would not be, for example, if the enrollment for this current year that we're in, the 24-25 enrollment year is under, the application is then submitted in 2026 in a different enrollment year. We can't do any look backs on that enrollment.
Thank you.
And I would like to add on one thing to that as well. Since these are small school districts, they will be getting the 5-year lock as part of this because it's a new Proposition 2 program that's being built here. So they would be under the Proposition 2. They'll get that 5-year lock. And theoretically, it should cover their whole entire time frame to do this project, especially when they go and submit to us their eligibility component at the time of the preliminary apportionment. So that'll then start the clock, theoretically 5 years, even if you were to go and get that 1 year of extension, because it should only be 4 years. If you remember in, I believe it's .157.5 or .6, it's one of those that goes over the time limits, 4 years, and then it'll be the 5th year if you go and get that extension under, I believe it's .6.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it should be all covered. Yeah.
5 years kind of match up, which is good. Thank you for your question, Steve. Any other questions on this topic at all, or any other comments from our folks? Okay, again, this is this is a program that we know is there's some high stakes involved, being with the limited amount of funding, and like I mentioned earlier, our goal is to make it as fair and equitable to as many districts as we can. So that's really what we're seeking to do here. If you see an area where you think we might be able to improve on that, please let us know. Whether it's today or when or maybe in the next couple of weeks, if you want to submit something to us in writing, we would really like to hear all those thoughts. Whether we adopt it or not, we'll consider them, but we would really like to hear from you all. Yeah, Josh is reminding me, I think the next meeting for this topic, it will be roughly in 6 weeks. We've been on about a 6 to 8 week track for most of our topics. Some of them are a little more complex than others. This one is one of them that was really complicated to get together. But we're at a point now where we're refining, I think. So I don't want to commit to a date just because we have so many topics up in the air, but I think it should be roughly 6 to 8 weeks, maybe sooner if we can get it sooner. But I don't think it would be beyond about 8 weeks. We really are eager to get all these programs off to the SAB and into the rulemaking process as soon as possible. We're trying to implement all the Prop 2 requirements as quickly as we can. There's just so many of them that we've accomplished a lot in the last 6-7 months, but there's still a lot to do. And so we're pressing through them as quickly as we can while also giving them time to, kind of marinate and for everybody to have time to really think through them and, consider all the different aspects. And so we'll be moving them forward as quickly as we can. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions. I think with that, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is energy efficiency. And I'm going to scroll down to where that item begins, and we will turn the floor over to Maria.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. As mentioned by Brian, I'm going to be speaking on the amended Education Code 17077.35, which is the supplemental grant for energy efficiency. As always, we would like to thank all of our stakeholders for both attending these meetings and giving feedback on how best to implement the amended statute. We are bringing this topic back again and elaborating on the potential scorecard metric that was discussed on April 17th for determining eligibility for this grant. This metric utilizes the California Collaborative for High Performance Schools, or the California CHIPS version 2.0 criteria, to help determine the percentage of supplemental funding that a project would be eligible for, and will be discussed later in this item. I will pause about halfway through this item for questions as well. Since the previous meeting, OPSC and DSA have had discussions to help finalize the scorecard so that the components used to determine the amount of points a project would receive follow statutory requirements. Before I get to explaining how the scorecard would work, we did have one stakeholder question in response to the information presented in the previous meeting. The question is regarding the abbreviated scorecard chart for the percentage of supplemental funding a project could be eligible for. Can you move down to the next page, Brian? And whether every compliance reporting method could have the full 5% of the grant as allowed by statute. Following discussions between OPSC and DSA, the previous scorecard chart has been updated to more accurately reflect more finalized criteria for project reviewing and scoring based on the components added. So we'll move on to the scorecard metric. What is being presented in this item is considered to be a beneficial option in determining whether a project will be eligible for this supplemental grant, as it is both practical and structured so that the statutory goal of promoting green energy is able to be met. It is the opinion of both DSA and OPSC that the California CHIPS version 2.0 rating system is an effective tool for achieving these goals. It is a well-established industry standard known for its sustainability-based building rating program and has been modified by OPSC and DSA to fit the requirements within the amended education code. Because of this, the scorecard would be referred to as the OPSC California CHIPS criteria. The revised proposed abbreviated framework is viewed by DSA as a semi-self-certifying program with the primary accountability assigned to the school districts and their design teams. The rating criteria will now comprise of 3 scorecard levels, which include a performance-only level with the exception of mandatory prescriptive measures that will need to exceed energy code by any margin above 0 points. The next level will need to have a baseline threshold score of 10 points. And then the final level will have an exceptional score of 51 points or higher. These scorecard levels will help determine the incremental percentages of supplemental funding a project would be eligible for. As this framework would be semi-self-certifying, a district would need to show statutory compliance through a narrative explanation with supporting documentation detailing how the criteria for the amended education code has been met. And this would be used to ensure that the project points are correctly assessed during processing. The scorecard, as seen on stamp pages 25 and 26 of this item, which has the different acceptable components that can be added during a project to meet statute, will be filled out by the applicant and will be used to determine the total score as a result of what is added during the project. The table you see on page 21, wait a moment, lists the code compliance and margins by which the results of the scorecard will be evaluated. They are separated by the prescriptive performance or all prescriptive approach and the performance only approach. Those projects that fall under the first approach will not receive a score if the total points are below 10. For scores that are 10 or above, the applicant would be eligible for the grant and can receive up to 4% of supplemental funding. Those projects that fall under the second approach will receive 1% margin with scores below 10 points and can receive up to 5% for scores between 51 and 130 points. As indicated, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
One thing I wanted to mention is in that first category in the table that says not applicable, I'm talking about this one right here. I believe, and maybe DSA can talk to this. I want to make sure I'm not making a mistake here, but I believe that it's not possible to score less than 10 points. And I can't remember the exact terminology they used, but the reason this is NA is just because it would never apply. And so just thought I'd mention that. Sorry.
No worries. And I think that DSA will speak to that a little bit more after we talk about the different approaches and how they look. There is a note below the table. The performance method is used for all reportable building systems and components, other than those that have mandatory prescriptive measures. This will be talked a little bit more in detail by the DSA representative soon. Go ahead to page 22. We'll now discuss the role these 2 compliance margins play into the evaluating of the percentage of funding a project will be eligible for. Both approaches have their own specifications affecting the eligibility calculation or the amount of supplemental funding as a result of the evaluation of a building's energy output. In the performance approach, all buildings in a project produce a compliance margin, whereas in the prescriptive approach, buildings are evaluated by energy components rather than the energy margins. And when combined as a prescriptive performance approach, the margin becomes unreliable. An example that DSA provided was that a building that is being measured by the performance approach will comply for the envelope design, but the mechanical systems would be measured by the prescriptive approach. In this case, the building would comply and be eligible for at least 1% of the supplemental grant, but the compliance would not be related to the entirety of the project, and the partial compliance could lead to project costs being impacted. As mentioned earlier and seen in the funding table, each approach will be eligible for different percentages of supplemental funding. The prescriptive performance approach, or all prescriptive approach, does not include the requirement that indicates all buildings must exceed energy code and therefore must score at least 10 points to be eligible for funding. The performance approach does require that all buildings must exceed energy code, and because of this, all projects reviewed by the performance approach will result in at least 1% of the supplemental grant. I will now turn the discussion over to the DSA representatives to further clarify how the compliance approaches will factor into the review process, and also to answer any questions you may have at this point in the presentation.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Maria. My name is Eric Druger. I'm Principal Architect at DSA. I'll let you know, I tried to turn on my video just now and I wasn't allowed to. You might be preventing that because of the early announcement. But so, oh, here we go. Start my video. Thank you. DSA will be reviewing this in concert with, to the first question that Maria brought up, we'll be reviewing this and will be reviewed by headquarters staff in parallel with the normal plan review. That is for those projects who are submitting new projects along with their application for funding. Should the applicant be submitting the project for funding based upon approved plans, notification will be required to DSA through our sustainability email inbox, and we will review the submitted documentation. And then at the end, in either case, we will confirm compliance and the level of funding that is appropriate based upon the self-certified documents that are submitted to DSA. So our role in this is mostly confirmation. We don't anticipate a back and forth comments like normal plan review for compliance with Title 24. However, I presume there may be some of that if there are questions needed to confirm the self-certifying scorecard and narrative that is submitted to DSA. But again, we do plan on reviewing that in parallel with the normal plan review for construction that occurs, and would be reporting via a letter to OPSC, the district, and the design professional general responsible charge after the project is approved. Should it have been previously approved, we'll notify at the end of our review all three parties, all three parties. In regards to the, perhaps, Brian, you can go back up to the scorecard on 21, sorry, not the scorecard, the funding levels tabulation on page, there we go. Okay, so there was a question why it's not applicable. The simple answer to that is that the prerequisites that are required to be able to submit the other points that are available add up to 10. And so you would never, if you're meeting all the prerequisites, you're automatically going to get that first 10 points. And then all subsequent additional points based upon those prerequisites would be scored accordingly. So that's the reason it simply just the not applicable is in that particular column. Okay, so now we can go to the scorecard that you were going to scroll to.
Yes. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can read these.
Sure, yeah, most of it's there on the left.
Yeah.
So while this is modified, the details of each criteria are not modified. By modified, what we mean is we've abbreviated the overall CHIPS grading criteria and selected only those things that are applicable to building energy. Certainly, CHIPS has a lot of criteria that relate to, say, site selection and things like that, but those are unrelated to statute. And so this list has been reduced to those things that relate more directly with energy. And so all of the CHIPS guidance related to each of these criteria is still applicable. So if you're looking for answers, if your design team is looking for answers and information regarding these CHIPS criteria, all of those are publicly available on the CHIPS website and help to inform some of the details behind how to comply with each of these criteria that have been selected. You can as this was published, you can certainly look at the details. I don't intend on going through each one of these at all, but if there are questions about them, we certainly are available to answer those. And you can email the DSA Sustainability email inbox, and we'll certainly respond to those.
Yeah, you can see the different categories here. We have integration and innovation, indoor environmental air quality, or indoor environmental quality, energy, and then water, site, and operations. So all those are, so there's up to 130 points available.
And also, I wanted to add to that, we've worked with CHIPS to verify what items are more applicable to energy compliance. And we've also removed any items that are already required in CalGreen, for instance.
Good note, thank you.
So I'll take questions at this point, Brian.
Yes, any questions out there? Not seeing any. I think there was a few other things that Maria wanted to go through.
Yes, thank you guys for speaking on that a little bit further. We'll now look at the proposed amendments to the SFP regulations that will take into account this new scoring methodology, as well as the timeline for applications that will fall under the Energy Efficiency Supplemental Grant that is funded by Proposition 2. We'll go ahead and go to stamp page 28. SFP regulations sections 1859.71.3 for new construction projects, and also 1859.78.5 for modernization projects will now include the verbiage indicating that projects received on or before October 30th, 2024 are subject to the original regulation language, and that projects received on or after October 31st, 2024 will be subject to the proposed amended regulations. In addition, subsection A5 has been added for both regulation sections. This information was originally at the end of the regulation sections, but we are proposing including it under A5 as it is relating to the previous subsection. This section speaks to the specification that if there are no funds remaining in the energy efficiency account, a district may withdraw the application that was received on or before October 30th, 2024, and resubmit when funds are available in that account, or continue with the processing of the application with the understanding that the apportionment will not include the supplemental grant for energy efficiency.
And just to be clear, that fund is depleted at the moment.
Mm-hmm. For the new proposed parts of this regulation, C1 and C2, as well as proposed D1 and D2 have been added to indicate that the project requesting the supplemental grant will have been confirmed by DSA to be exceeding the non-residential energy efficiency standards per statute. and through compliance approaches discussed in this item. In addition, the regulation sections will also reference the OPSC California CHIPS scorecard and the percentage increments a district will be eligible for depending on the compliance approach utilized and the resulting point score of the project. So both the new construction regulations for this section and the modernization have similar language in them to address those situations. I see we have a question from Alana. For example, a district has a new construction eligibility update on file with 2024, 2020, or 2023, 2024 seabeds, which hasn't been processed along with the design application.
I think that was from the previous
Okay,
topic.
that's for the previous topic. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, perfect. If no one has any other questions for these regulation sections, we'll move to page 31 and 32. So along with these amended regulation sections, OPSC is proposing adjustments to the Form SAB 5004 so that applications requesting energy efficiency supplemental funding will be better equipped to reflect the new proposed methodology for grant determination. The specific instructions will include the language differentiating applications by the received dates to ensure that the application is correctly processed. OPSC is proposing that the actual grant requests in either section 5G or 6B be revised to remove the percentage symbol and instead specify what percent the project is exceeding for each building, as well as the compliance approach used and the resulting OPSC California CHIPS point score the project received. And then lastly, OPSC is proposing that in the certification section 2024, that it include language indicating that the plans and specifications do exceed the non-residential energy building efficiency standards per statute. Okay, I'll go ahead and open this up for questions. This will conclude the discussion on the proposed changes. I'll turn it back to Brian, and if you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and we thank you again for being a part of this conversation.
Thank you. Let's see, we do have a question from Justin. You mentioned that this fund is currently depleted. Can you share how, when the Energy Efficiency Fund will be funded and what level of funding is expected? Justin, I was speaking about the prior regulations. So we had, I'm going to scroll back up here to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this section up here was for our old energy efficiency grants that were part of, I believe it was Prop 47. I could be mistaken on that. And those funds are depleted. The current program is outlined here down in little c. We do not have any sort of limit on the funds that can go out for energy efficiency for Prop 2 projects. So for applications received on or after October 31st, 2024, you can apply for the new energy efficiency grants, which is essentially what we've been discussing this entire time. We just didn't want to make this section completely inoperable in case there's a chance that some of that money comes back in at some future point. I don't think we anticipate that happening for the prior program, the prior standards, but we left it in here just in case. And so I just wanted to make that distinction that this section here that I'm highlighting really applies to the old energy efficiency program, not the current one. The current one was outlined in AB 247 as part of Proposition 2, and it doesn't put a cap on it. Previously, we had an allocation or an appropriation of $29 million from that prior bond that was for energy. In this case, as long as there is Proposition 2 money remaining for either new construction or modernization applications, you can apply for an increase to your grant due to energy efficiency if you meet these criteria. So we don't really have a limit or a cap on the amount of funds we can approve for energy efficiency under Proposition 2. I just wanted to make it clear that the former program is depleted, not this current one. Good question. Thank you. And I'm glad I got an opportunity to clarify that in case there's any confusion. So really appreciate you asking that. Okay, any other questions on energy? Or are there any questions going back to the first item for the small school district program? We have plenty of time left, so if there's anybody that wants to discuss anything or bring anything up, now is a great time to do it. I'm going to wait just a minute or two here before we do anything else.
I can just confirm there's no questions in the conference room. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. Sorry for the interruption we had just at the beginning of our meeting. Can't control everything. We'll do our best to make sure that the video is, when we upload this to our YouTube page, that it's without that, obviously. Appreciate everybody hanging in there and sticking around. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Wanted to thank everybody once again for being a part of these meetings. I know I say it every time, but the collaboration aspect of these meetings is critical to making sure that we have good programs in place. We really, really value your opinion and your input. So thank you for taking the time to be here, for asking questions if you ask questions, or just participating and being interested in what we're doing here. It means a great deal to all of us. And we hope that it means a lot to you too. And we hope to bring you the best programs we can. So thanks again for being with us today. We'll be joining you shortly in the next few weeks. I don't want to announce exactly when we're going to be back, but we're going to probably have 2 meetings in July. They're going to be at the same time on Thursdays. So look out for information on that. And we look forward to working with you again soon and seeing all of you soon. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.